In August 1976, a dedicated expedition scales the sheer face of Little Mangere Island. The survival of an entire avian lineage hinges on what awaits them at the summit. The black robin is a diminutive, velvet-plumed creature. It possesses weak flight capabilities, shows virtually no fear of humans, and spends its existence near the forest floor. A previous census was expected to locate 9 individuals, but the team finds only 7. Among them, just 2 are female, and only 1 is capable of breeding. Marked with a distinct sapphire legband, she became known as Old Blue. Her salvation would spark the most audacious wildlife preservation initiative in New Zealand history. For millennia across the Chatham Islands, this creature had no reason to fear the ground. No predatory species existed to threaten a nest built just 3 feet above the soil. The birds adapted to absolute tranquility, becoming trusting, slow, and largely flightless. Then, vessels arrived, bringing feline and rodent predators that infiltrated the woodlands faster than anyone could perceive. By 1871, the species had completely vanished from the primary 90,000-hectare island, which had suddenly transformed into an absolute trap. Within a few decades, they disappeared from every sanctuary except one. What remained was Little Mangere, a 22-acre fortress of rock, inaccessible to predators precisely because it was unreachable for humans. For nearly a century, academic science lost track of the species. Only in 1938 did 2 adventurous students, Charles Fleming and Graham Turbot, complete the perilous ascent up that vertical fortress, discovering between 25 and 35 pairs. That was the entire global population. 3 more decades passed before researchers observed the bird alive again in 1968. By then, only about 30 individuals survived, and subsequent surveys grew progressively bleaker, counting 18 in 1972 and 11 in 1975. A unique lineage was fading right before the eyes of those attempting to intervene. One particular expedition from that era remained etched in the team's memory. In 1972, a crossing was made over the turbulent channel between the islands in a battered 10-foot aluminum craft with a compromised hull. Lacking safety vests and constantly bailing out water, the team managed to arrive safely and record 26 birds, offering a brief illusion of stability. Yet a year later, nearly half of the monitored birds had vanished over the winter. Each season, the younger generation could barely offset the mortality rate of the older birds, while the canopy at the summit was collapsing under invasive vines, depriving the residents of their primary foraging grounds. The mission to arrest this decline fell to a man whose childhood had been defined by a deep connection to nature. Born in Devonport in 1939 and raised near Waimaeku Beach, Don Merton was often teased by classmates for his obsession with wildlife. Instead of sports, he spent his youth tracking nests. As a child, he would rescue displaced wild finch chicks from the coastline and place them beneath his grandmother's canary, which reared them as her own. 35 years later, that childhood experiment would form the foundation of a revolutionary survival strategy. In January 1973, Merton returned to the cliffs with a specialist who secured a custom 16-foot ladder and safety lines to the rock face. The climb became more manageable, though no less daunting. During that period, the team discovered the population had plummeted far lower than 26. Merton advocated fiercely for an immediate evacuation to a larger neighboring sanctuary, but bureaucratic hesitation delayed the authorization until 1976, when only 9 birds remained. Even then, official permission covered the relocation of just a single breeding pair. When the rescue team finally reached the summit that summer, they discovered only 7 individuals, including just 2 females. Faced with the reality of a species on the absolute brink, leaving the remaining pair on a deteriorating cliff was a hazard no one could justify. The mandate was expanded on site, and both pairs were prepared for transport. The descent was executed in phases. The foundational female, Old Blue, and her partner were secured in specialized transport enclosures and lowered down the 600-foot precipice. Although a severe storm delayed the extraction of the remaining birds for several days, the entire surviving group was eventually transferred across the rough waters. A cinematographer capturing the final phase of the transfer noted a profound shift in the rescuers the moment the transport enclosures were placed in their hands. The weight of an entire species was suddenly tangible. Yet, relocation offered no immediate guarantees. The initial season on the new island proved exceptionally difficult when one male vanished without a trace. However, the remaining foundational pair successfully reared a single offspring to adulthood, providing the first critical evidence that the new habitat could support their kind. By 1980, the global population had dwindled to just 5 individuals. Returning to the sanctuary, researchers documented a bittersweet reality. One juvenile belonging to Old Blue and her new partner, a male designated as Old Yellow, was already independent. Another pair had formed nearby, but their union would prove genetically inconsequential. Only Old Blue and her companion possessed the capacity to produce viable offspring. Though their initial clutch that season was unfertilized, Old Blue defied her species' strictly monogamous traits, permanently switching to her younger partner. Her subsequent clutch proved entirely fertile. It was during this critical window that Merton observed a behavioral quirk that changed everything. When a pair lost their nest to a severe storm, they immediately began constructing a replacement. This revealed that if eggs are removed, the birds do not abandon the season. They simply lay again. Merton initiated an unprecedented strategy, transferring eggs from Old Blue's nest to the home of a local warbler species. While the foster parent incubated the initial clutch, the biological mother produced a replacement. Though the initial attempt failed because the warbler's diet did not suit the fledglings, the team pivoted the following year. In 1981, with the population still hovering at 5, the team began utilizing the local tomtit population on a neighboring island as foster parents. Every delicate egg was transported across open water by boat. The strategy worked brilliantly. Finding her nest empty, Old Blue produced 3 successive clutches in a single season. The population began to rise significantly. By the mid-1980s, the islands were home to several dozen individuals, and in 1983, a secondary, self-sustaining population was established on a neighboring island, ensuring the species was no longer vulnerable to a single, localized disaster. Old Blue was relocated to this secondary sanctuary in 1983, where she was observed healthy in a sunlit forest late that November, before vanishing permanently into the wilderness a few weeks later. She had lived for at least 13 years, roughly 3 times the average lifespan for her kind. Her passing was so significant that it was formally acknowledged within New Zealand's parliament. By 1989, Merton confirmed via radiophone to his family that the species had crossed a monumental threshold, with the census revealing 53 adults and 56 new fledglings. The intensive foster program was permanently concluded in 1990, allowing the birds to propagate naturally. The methodology, which became known as close order management, involved tracking every individual, parent, and nest. When a population numbers fewer than 10, traditional conservation biology ceases to apply. There are only individual lives, none of which can be compromised. This intensive, hands-on approach did produce unexpected challenges, as some fledglings raised by foster parents suffered an identity crisis, attempting to court the wrong species, though researchers quickly managed the situation. While scientists managed every egg on the cliffs, the narrative captured the imagination of the entire country through a series of prominent documentaries broadcast throughout the 1980s. These productions catalyzed an unprecedented wave of public and political support for environmental preservation across the nation. By 1998, the population neared 200 individuals, and the framework validated by this project became a global blueprint for saving critically endangered fauna worldwide, from unique parrots to isolated island species in the Indian Ocean. Merton eventually transitioned to other complex preservation frontiers, receiving an honorary doctorate in 1992 and publishing a definitive insider account of the rescue mission. He retired from official service in 2005, remaining an active figure in regional environmental efforts until his passing. Colleagues remembered him as a true visionary of modern conservation, a man whose methodologies preserve lineages that would otherwise have vanished from the earth. Yet, the salvation of the species carried an invisible biological price. By 1984, researchers noticed a behavioral anomaly where certain females began depositing eggs on the outer rim of the nest rather than the center, causing them to chill and fail. Intending to help, researchers repeatedly moved the eggs back into the incubation cup, inadvertently allowing a dominant genetic trait inherited directly from Old Blue's lineage to proliferate. By 1989, over half the female population exhibited this behavior. Only when scientists stopped intervening and allowed natural selection to take its course did the frequency of this flawed behavior drop significantly over the following decades. A more profound challenge persists today. Every living representative of this species descends from the exact same ancestral pair, resulting in one of the highest levels of genetic uniformity ever recorded in a wild avian population. A singular pathogen could theoretically compromise the entire species simultaneously. This vulnerability prompted a recent intervention in September 2022, when a dedicated team transferred 10 females to a declining subpopulation to avert localized extinction. Most of these relocated individuals successfully integrated into their new habitat. By 2022, international conservation authorities upgraded the species from endangered to vulnerable, though national classification retains them at the highest threat tier. The global population stands at 445 individuals, a number that reflects two starkly different realities. One sanctuary has reached its maximum ecological capacity, with roughly 400 residents, while the secondary site supports only 45 individuals due to slow forest regeneration and high winter mortality. Existing entirely on two minuscule islands encompassing just over 1 square mile, these birds cannot colonize new territories independently due to their limited flight capacity. Every prospective habitat must be reached via human assistance. A recent attempt to establish a third population within a protected enclosure on a neighboring island was unsuccessful due to resource competition from invasive mice. Present efforts are focused on completely eradicating predators from new candidate locations before any further translocations occur. In March 2026, a major ecological initiative commenced on the primary island, clearing nearly 18,000 acres of apex threats. While designed to benefit the broader ecosystem, this pristine, predator-free terrain represents the exact environment the species requires to truly thrive, beyond its current confined sanctuaries. If these mainland initiatives succeed, the expansion of their habitat will finally transition from theoretical reports into reality. Ultimately, there is one location researchers regard with exceptional reverence: the isolated fortress of Little Mangere. The native flora there has finally begun to regenerate naturally, raising the profound possibility that this unique creature may one day return to the very cliffs from which the last survivors were gathered. If you appreciate deep dives into the extraordinary efforts required to protect our planet's most fragile ecosystems, consider subscribing to the channel to stay updated on our upcoming historical documentaries.